said for many years, Scott, that we wind up many times being almost like emotional coaches, especially during times like this. And so I think you and I both, we were talking about how we feel about our own accounts. Mm-hmm. We will readily acknowledge the emotion that doesn't feel good. Like for me, it's at $50,000 markers, whether we've gone north of however many 150,000 or whatever $100,000 marker. When we go south of that and then stay south of that after we've been staying north of that, I feel the emotion of it and I get it. I understand where our clients are coming from and where people who are invested in 401k and aren't even working with an advisor. I understand the weight of how that feels. At the same time, just like you said, we don't want people to make, decisions where they're doing the wrong thing at the wrong time for the wrong reason. So rather than acting on your emotions, we want to talk about logic and what this probably means about what is in front of you.
Yeah, and certainly if you're in your pre-retirement years or within the retirement red zone, 5 to 10 years away, or you're in retirement, you're not all in on the market. But right. Your investment strategy likely does include some growth elements to it. We've got a neat chart from Invesco, and we're going to put that up for our video audience. On the left side of the chart, you're going to see some things that we've probably talked about before on the show. And I'm told Casey doesn't have that chart, so we're going to just kind of walk through this for you. So you've heard about missing the best days in the market and what impact that has on your overall return. So if you take a look at the S&P 500 index and the annualized total returns from 1994 through 2024, if you had a $100,000 investment and you were fully invested in the index, which, by the way, the disclaimer is you can't invest directly into the index, and past performance is not indicative of future results, but over those past 30 years, you would have turned that $100,000 into about $2.2 million if you stayed in for the entire time. If you missed the 10 best days of that, it would reduce it by all the way down to $1 million. So your annualized return is 11% if you stayed invested, and it drops all the way down to 8.1 if you miss just the 10 best days in the market.
With Scott, a difference, I would rather focus on the dollar amount than the percentage, a difference of $1.2 million between being invested the full time and missing only the best 10 days. And, we've talked about this information a lot. What we haven't seen in the past is a very clear way to put together what do some of those best days look like. Yep. And I would love to talk about during the financial crisis in 08, 09, a little bit into late 2007. But during that time, let's just go through some of these. On October 13th of 2008, so it was during the crisis, we were right in the midst of it. On that day, the return was 11.6% in one day. Most people would be happy to get incredible. That in a year. That was in one day. And so what happens is you're in, and we see this if you dig down into the graphs that show, the mountain charts of kind of where the market is on any given day. You see it goes down, and then you see this little pop-up, and you see it goes down, and you see this little pop-up. But if you miss the pop-up, you have tremendously impacted what would have been your overall performance throughout your lifetime.
Yeah. So to put some meat behind that, missing the 30 best days, remember the 11% return if you stayed invested over the last 30 years, missing the 30 best days would drop your return from 11% to 4.6%. And it would and the effect of it would turn your $100,000 into only $386,000 versus $2.2 million. Now, I'm going to be honest. When I've seen those charts like that before, it's hard for me to believe.
Yeah.
But when you see it with the information you just relayed, you see it. The numbers match. The numbers line up.
Well, and think about missing the best 30 days we're talking about a 30-year time period. So like one day a year on average. if you're out for those best days, then you're going to miss a significant amount of returns. So again, we'll circle back to, we don't want you to do the wrong thing at the wrong time for the wrong reason. Investing is not a place for your emotions. You don't make emotional decisions about your money. So we want to be sure that if you're feeling emotional about things, that's okay. Pick up the phone, give us a call. We're happy to walk you through what our thoughts are what we're doing, not to say that my life is the same as yours financially, but what we're doing in our own portfolios, what our logic is as we approach this currently.
Yeah, and I think we think about people maybe not really jumping ship entirely. Some people do. There's no question about it that it happens. But I think about how many times have I heard a client or maybe a prospective client talk about with me, well, I'm going to just sit on the sidelines and wait until things calm down. Right? Well, that's very common.
And in 2008, I kid you not, we heard people doing that for a decade. Like it would be their first introduction to GenWealth. Maybe they were coming in 2015 for the first time, and they're like, 2008 scared me, and I've been in cash since then. Like, oh my goodness, what they have missed. Yeah.
And the point being there is, if you're sitting on the sidelines and waiting for things to calm down, you're missing the best days because they happen while things are not calm. And we do have that graphic up now for our video audience. I realize that's pretty busy there, and we've kind of already talked over it. But if you look at the 30 best days, the majority of them happen during crisis. If it was the tech wreck at the beginning of the 21st century, if it was the financial crisis, as Janet went over, COVID-19, which was very short-lived, by the way, in terms of market volatility. But a lot of the best days of the last 30 years came during the COVID-19 crisis, and then a handful on the outskirts of those three major crises. So, again, the point being is stay invested. Don't let your emotions take over during times like this. And I can't stress enough that if you have a written financial plan, that helps, because your plan is not emotional. Yeah. Your plan is not going to get emotional, and you will be able to look and see, hey, we planned for this. Over the short term, we're expecting some market volatility, but over the long term, we're expecting to have those types of returns you saw on that chart. Hope that helps walking you through this time. We know no matter how many times you go through it, it still can feel like the first time when it happens. But hopefully this is going to be short-lived and not going to be like 2022, and we'll see what happens. But again, over the long term, staying invested is the best way to reach your long-term goals, and volatility is the price we pay for that long-term growth. Let's dive into our questions this week. We're going to start with Emily via email. I want to watch my family enjoy what I've earned over the years. Are there opportunities for tax-efficient wealth transfer to heirs while still alive? Emily, thanks for the question. And yes, there are. There are fewer options while you're still alive, for sure. But before we get to that, we want to certainly start by asking, are you okay? Do you know if your retirement income plan is going to keep you in the basic lifestyle and really overall lifestyle that you want through your retirement years, and you're confident that you're not going to run out of money and be able to meet all of your obligations if healthcare costs rise, if you need long-term care, and then get to do the things that you want to do. So be careful about that. And we would certainly assume that you think you're going to be okay, but make sure you have a retirement income plan built. And then if you do, you know the amount that you can set aside for your legacy. Now, you've asked us to help you with tax-efficient thoughts about transferring that while you're still alive. I think the first thing I think of, Janet, is the amount you can gift, because that certainly is the best way. And if you have enough different people that you want to gift to, that number could be rather large.
It can add up for sure. So the gift tax exclusion for 2025, and this does change every year. So when you roll into next year, you'll need to check and see what the updated number is. But for this year, it's $19,000 per recipient. So, Emily, you could give $19,000 to, let's say you have an adult child and that adult child is married. So you could give $19,000 to the child and the spouse if you wanted to. And if you are married, then your husband could do the same thing. So there's a significant opportunity there for gifting. If you go above that amount, it is not taxable. A lot of people think that it is, but it is reportable above that amount. So if you stay below that threshold, then you don't have to worry about that. But one of the other keys that a lot of people don't think about, if you have grandchildren who are going to college, you can actually pay the institution directly, and it doesn't count as a gift. It doesn't count towards your lifetime exclusion on that. So you have an opportunity to help whichever generation is responsible for college education, whether it's your kids or the actual grandkid who's paying for it. That's an opportunity for you to be able to make a difference for them in a very tangible way, but it doesn't count as gifting.
Yeah, and I think that's the other piece to this is I would ask Emily, when you say you want to watch your family enjoy it, in what way?
Yeah.
Do you want to watch them enjoy it? There's obviously, outside of the tax equation, take them on vacation. Spend some money on them while you're alive. I think about that in my own life a lot, and we hear that from clients, is that I want to see my kids and my grandkids enjoy their inheritance before I'm gone. And I think that really exists, or that desire can exist outside of the tax question, regardless of what you're paying the taxes on. You'd be paying the taxes, not them, and they would get to enjoy it. But then there's other things too, back into the tax equation, that you could think about. It might not be a vacation, it might not be a car or education, but it would allow your children to participate in some things that could be long lasting. I think about donor advised funds, DAFs for short. You can donate highly appreciated assets to a donor-advised fund without incurring a capital gains tax. If you're still working, you can donate a significant portion of your income to that donor-advised fund. Now, keep in mind, this is not, again, going to enhance the lifestyle, per se, of your kids or your grandkids, but it certainly would allow them to participate in where those charitable distributions go. So in essence, a donor advised fund is now going to own those dollars, right? So you do have to give up something. There's always a give and take when it comes to tax efficiency. But if you want to donate either the assets or the cash to the donor advised fund, it's now in that fund. You're not using it. Your kids and grandkids are not using it for their personal benefits, but they can help direct where those dollars go from a charitable perspective.
I think there's also just the question of, and we kind of alluded to this earlier when we were talking about getting her plan together, there's a question of how much money are we talking about. We have been working with some people recently that I'm so excited for them about this, because they're going to go into retirement with far more in assets than what they had previously anticipated, which is a fabulous blessing. And so their need is not that they have to pull from everything that they have. They're not going to have that high of an income need. And so we've actually set aside a portion of their dollars that we're internally labeling as their gifting account. And so each year they can pull gains off of that and still maintain the account, but pull those gains off and just decide, what do we want to do this year? What's the way that we want to help our family or charitable organizations, whatever the case may be. So it's a very fun thing, Emily, for us to solve for, because we love just the joy of giving. It's a big deal for us, and so we'd love to help you solve that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because when she asked about tax efficient wealth transfer, if she is willing to pay some taxes,
right,
then there's going to be a lot of opportunities, right,
sure,
to pass that on to the next generation and not have a tax problem. I think about unwinding the IRAs just in general, because of the inherited IRA rule for your kids, where they're going to have to take it out in 10 years, and it could be a tax bomb. Probably likely would be if you waited until RMD age. So unwinding that, getting some cash, being able to gift that cash, being able to set it aside to transfer upon your death. There's not going to be a huge tax burden on cash. If you put it into a taxable investment account, you're going to get a cost basis step up at death. So there's a lot of options for you to create a tax-efficient wealth transfer if you're willing to pay the taxes. I say this all the time. There's so much out there about, hey, you can do this and live a tax-free retirement. And this is my answer to that. It's easy to create a tax-free retirement, but you got to pay the taxes on it to create the tax-free retirement.
Yeah, the IRS is going to get a check at some point on pretty much everything. And so you do want to be sure that you're looking at the whole picture. If you're solving for taxes now, then somebody's going to pay taxes later. If you're solving for taxes later, then you're going to pay taxes now. Now, that's an oversimplification, but that is kind of the big picture. So there are some ways that we can work around some of that. Like, as an example, and we talk about Roth IRAs a lot, and I don't really know what Emily's timeline is, but you know, if you were to have more dollars in a Roth IRA, and I'm not saying to go and do this, I don't know what the impact would be. Like, if you're converting a lot, that's a taxable event. You pay the taxes now, but the longer that money sits there, the greater the benefit in the future. So again, it's a question of now or later, when do you want that tax efficiency?
We want to remind you to subscribe to our YouTube channel for exclusive content you can't find anywhere else to help you discover, protect, and share true financial independence. Just search for GenWealth Financial Advisors on YouTube and get access to that content. Our next question on the Get Ready for the Future show comes to us from Nancy in Little Rock. I'm 67 and looking to retire next year. I have multiple different types of accounts with my retirement savings. How can I structure my withdrawals to avoid pushing myself into a higher tax bracket? How do my withdrawals impact the taxation of my Social Security benefits? More tax questions today.
Yeah,
It's tax day.
We must be coming up on April 15th,
yes,
huh?
People have taxes on the brain. Well, the good news here is, Nancy, if you tell us that you have multiple different types of accounts with your retirement savings, that's going to give us some options. So I think that's the great piece of it. So let's walk through. Nancy, you may be already familiar with the way those accounts are going to be taxed when you withdraw, but not everybody listening may know that. So let's talk about it. Whether it is an IRA or a 401k, traditional IRA or a pre-tax 401k, those contributions have not been taxed. Now, they have had all this tax-deferred growth in your pre-retirement years, and as you begin to take those out at retirement, they're going to be taxed at ordinary income tax rate. So in essence, you're getting a paycheck just like you did, and it's probably going to need some withholdings before you get your net amount, but that's going to be taxable income. And she's asking here about how to avoid pushing herself into a higher tax bracket. So every withdrawal you take on that is going to start to add up, right? Then you have a chance to look at your Roth IRA or your Roth 401k. Many people have those options available to them now. Those contributions were made after tax, and they've grown tax deferred, and they will be tax free when you withdraw them. So it's a great piece of flexibility to have because you can take money out on a lump sum basis, whether you need to buy a new car or you want to take a vacation, and it's not going to be added to your taxable income. But if you have enough Roth money, you can start to layer that in on a month-by-month basis and keep yourself from going into a higher tax bracket.
You know, Scott, we talk about diversification in investing. This is diversification in your tax treatment of your assets, and it really is a good thing to roll into retirement with some choices tax-wise. So I'm glad that you are where you are on that. Nancy, I'll tell you about another opportunity that you don't have quite yet, but you will have in just a few short years. You said you're 67 right now. When you get to 70 and a half, you'll have an opportunity to do a qualified. I almost gave you the wrong. I started to use the wrong Q word. There's a quadro that I was talking to somebody about earlier. This is a QCD, a qualified charitable distribution. You have the opportunity to do a QCD at 70 and a half. And what a qualified charitable distribution is you're able to make a contribution from your traditional IRA dollars. So if you were to take that money directly to you, it's taxable. But by going directly from your IRA to the charitable organization, then that actually is going to help keep your income level lower, and that income level impacts how much of your Social Security is taxed and your Medicare premiums. All of that comes into play. And we've actually got a software other piece that we work with people on a regular basis beyond age 70 and a half to make sure that this QCD, this qualified charitable distribution, is getting us where we need to be in terms of the impact on especially your Medicare premiums. So that's a possibility once you turn 70 and a half. So we can look at that then.
Yeah, and the other piece to that too, when you say you have multiple different types of accounts, you might have taxable investment accounts too, and they are not going to be considered income, ordinary income, but they could be taxed for capital gains, dividends, and interest, but that could help blend as well into your overall income picture. So Nancy doesn't say she's married, so if you are single in retirement, you are pinched a little bit more in terms of jumping that next bracket. The big one you're going to want to work on, if you can, is going from the 12% to the 22%. That's the big jump, and that does happen for single filers in 2025 when you eclipse $48,475 of ordinary or earned income, taxable income. If you're married filing jointly, you actually have a little bit more wiggle room. You can get up to $96,950 before you jump that bracket. But that's the main one, I think, because after that, you go from 22 to 24. It's not going to be a big deal. But if you can somehow exist in that 12%, and the other piece of this that I think of, Janet, though, a lot of people are so laser beam focused on that, but you also want to live the retirement you want to live here. You don't want to penny pinch to keep from paying a higher tax because it can affect your life.
Your quality of life. Yeah. I would absolutely say that your quality of life is more important than exactly how many dollars did I pay in taxes. So let's find some balance between those.
Second piece to her question was the Social Security benefits. And we're going to explain this as best we can. It gets confusing because it's the government, right? So a lot of people don't realize Social Security benefits are taxable, I should say.
Yes.
Not everybody has them taxed. It depends on your income. In Arkansas, Social Security benefits are not taxed at the state level, but on the federal level, taxpayers should take half of their Social Security money that they collected during the year and add it to other income like pensions, the traditional IRA distributions we talked about, potential employment. And if you're single and the total is over $25,000, and that's probably most everybody listening here, then part of the Social Security benefit is likely taxable. If you're married and it's over $32,000, the same applies. 50% of your Social Security benefit is taxable if you fall between $25,000 and $34,000 for a single filer, or $32,000 to $44,000 for a married filer. Up to 85% of the benefit may be taxable if you make more than $34,000 single or more than $44,000 married. Bottom line here is more than likely your benefits are going to be taxed, at least partially.
And I would say, most of the time, by the time you look at a household, if you're looking at a husband and wife, in most cases, we're going to be up to that 85% of that is taxable. 85% of your Social Security benefits are taxable if you're at that $44,000 or higher income level as a married person. But Scott, I would go back to what we were talking about a moment ago on the qualified charitable distributions. I don't think it's as much about the taxation impact on your Social Security because, like you said, I would solve for quality of life before I would solve for the tax impact on Social Security. But if you can change some things about, like, if you're already going to be charitably minded, then how you give that contribution, if you just change how you do it, then you're still able to do what you want to do and have a positive impact on your Medicare premiums. I think that is the greater possibility for you to influence rather than the taxes on Social Security itself.
Yeah, and I think the bottom line here for me, as we've already kind of alluded to, if you are laser beam focused on staying in a lower tax bracket, know that that's going to affect your overall lifestyle potentially if you have the means, because of your investments, to live a different kind of lifestyle. So don't be solely focused on the taxation. But the other piece to say that I'd like to say here is, if that is your focus, you really need to begin planning for it long before retirement. Now, in Nancy's case, she said she does have multiple different types of accounts. Maybe she did prepare for that, or maybe it just worked out that way. But if you're really trying to prepare for a low tax retirement, the best thing you can do is to start doing something about it long before you retire, whether that's contributing to Roth IRAs. That the other piece I think that people forget is If you're the only one working and your spouse doesn't work, you can still contribute to a Roth IRA for your spouse. So that does increase those limits up to $16,000. If you're over 50, each person can put $8,000. So if you do that for several pre-retirement years, you're getting some tax-free dollars built up. In the early years of retirement, you can look at Roth IRA conversions, because as your income does potentially go down in the first couple of years of retirement, you can fill up that 12% tax bracket or the 22% tax bracket. Wherever you already are going to be, you can add some conversion dollars to that, as long as you have the cash on the sidelines to pay for it. And I think this is, if you're really preparing, Janet, I think about this too, building up a big stack of cash in your pre-retirement years so that you can live on some of that, because that's not going to be taxable.
Absolutely. And, we were talking at the top of the show about how the market is down right now. Yeah. It's a good time. If you're going to consider conversions, this is a good time to look at it, because you have X number of shares that are now worth less per share than what they were a few weeks ago. So why not convert some of those now? Again, you have to look at your individual situation and see if it's right, but you have an opportunity to convert more at this point in terms of share count than what you would have otherwise.
We're going to call this our question of the week. Congratulations to Nancy for reaching out with that question. We want to send you a free Get Ready for the Future Show tumbler. All you have to do is email us to claim it. Send it to show@getreadyforthefuture.com. And if you want to get in on the action of that free tumbler and maybe be named the question of the week, you got to send us one first, right? We want your questions. You can send it to us via text or leave a voicemail for us at this number, 501-381-5228. Again, it's 501-381-5228. Our final question of the day comes from Bubba in Hot Springs. I don't know if this is Bubba's Brewery or not, but it's Bubba from
See
Hot
what the
Springs.
question is about. Maybe we'll know.
Should I consider a multifamily property as my first investment, living in one unit and renting the others? I'm 34 and single and looking to produce some side income. Bubba, I'm going to step out and say, not if this is your first investment, okay? It's potentially a good investment, but not your first investment.
And not unless you have some significant cash reserves. Yeah. Scott, you and I both have some rental property that we have kind of in addition to everything else that we're doing investment-wise. And I would say, Bubba, you have to be prepared for you to be singularly responsible for all of the expenses of the property, things like property taxes and insurance and even the mortgage payment, because you don't know. You assume that you'll have a renter and that things will go well, but you don't know that. And when it comes time for repairs, what is insurance going to cover and what has to be out of pocket? All of those things, you have to have some pretty significant cash reserves, and I'll say that from personal experience. I don't regret having rental income. I'm glad that we've done that as a family, but there have definitely been times when we were very thankful for the reserves that we had to get us through a not so pretty spot.
I think it's really a good time generally to take on risk when you're younger and you're single and you don't have other responsibilities. So I want to say that, first of all, if you want to be a risk taker, that's great. But I think there's other things to consider, at least consider. Now, whether you take us up on this or not, that's up to you. But I know it's easy to think at 34 more of current income than retirement income, but what are you doing for retirement? We're laser beam focused on financial independence at this firm and on this show, so we want to make sure we're taking a look at that first. Are you contributing to an employer plan? Do you have the full match? Or are you preparing in any way for your financial future? Because you don't want to not do that in the pursuit of bigger current income dollars. Do you have plans to get married, Bubba? Because that's going to increase your expenses. So getting too far in on the expense side, as Janet was talking about, can really have a hindrance if your expenses are going to go up later in life. You're going to get married and you have kids. And certainly you can make some changes to that real estate portfolio, but that is something to consider. What is your current cash flow, the margin between expenses and income? When I jumped into the rental piece, my goal was, if I don't ever, we do a short-term rental. I think you have long-term more.
Right.
We do a short-term rental, so we do Airbnb and Burbo. My goal was to be able to make the payments, do the expenses, pay the expenses on the house if we never rented it.
Yeah.
Right? I wanted to be able to incur that in my cash flow situation. And not everybody's going to be able to be in that situation. I understand that. But that was my goal because I didn't want it to change my lifestyle if we never rented this thing. So I think that's important, too, to remember for. And how stable is your current employment? You're talking about some side income. Do you feel like you're going to keep your job? There's a lot of other safer ways to get some side income going.
Yeah. I look at this kind of, since we've been talking about where the market is, when your investments in your 401k, as an example, when those go down, we're in a negative time period, it doesn't cost you money from your cash flow. But if you draw the same parallel to rental property, when you're in a negative situation in rental property, there's a problem, whatever it is, the property's not occupied, it needs repairs, whatever. It costs you money from your personal cash flow. So you do have to look at this a little bit differently in terms of your preparedness to invest in this way.
I think that real estate, once we have answers to all those questions we just talked about, is a great investment, as we've already alluded to. I would ask, why multifamily over single, though? You certainly are going to need a lot more capital, more than likely, to get into a complex than you would a single-family home. Now, granted, he's wanting to live in it as well, so he's looking for a rent-free option here.
Yeah, I think, I'm just going to jump in here for a minute. I think what he's talking about, and it says renting the others, plural, so it might be a quadplex or more, but I would be okay with a duplex because your cost is not that much more than a house, and you are probably still getting the expenses covered by the person who's renting from the other side. But Scott, you're dead on accurate. When you go much beyond that, then the cost to get into it and to cover it independently is going to be much higher.
Yeah, the last thing you want to be, Bubba, is over-leveraged at age 34, because we've seen a lot of people that they've had to focus so much time and effort on getting out of debt that it has been to the detriment of pursuing and achieving their financial independence. So we're very leery about that, getting into too much debt, but certainly overall, dipping your toe into real estate can be a very good investment. If you want to talk about more of that with an advisor, certainly reach out to us here at GenWealth. But you heard the final bell there. I think that was back in there somewhere.
Yeah, it was very subtle, but it was there. It was there. I think my word today is stability, and the thought around that is, the market may not be giving you stability, but you can seek stability from a plan, a written financial plan on paper, on purpose. For Bubba, you may not have stability necessarily at this point thinking about possibly having rental properties, but you can build stability into your life through planning, making sure you've got the income that we talked about, making sure you have an emergency fund that is very solid for rental property. So seeking, if you're not already there financially, seeking stability in your life, in your financial life, I think is very important to do.
I think to build on that, the stability piece, I think of the give and take, right?
Yeah.
We talk about the give and take with market volatility. The short-term volatility is the price we pay for long-term growth. We talk about taxation. We had 2 questions on taxation. There's some give and take there. If you're laser beam focused on avoiding or minimizing taxes, you could sacrifice some quality of life in retirement. And if you're laser beam focused on the side hustle, you could get yourself over leveraged in debt. I think for me, that comes back to the value of a coach. Walking through these decisions with you from an unemotional standpoint so that you can reach the most logical conclusion and the best decision for you. And if you want to learn more about what you need to know before retirement, we invite you to join us Tuesday, April 8th at 6:30 at the Chenal Event Venue in Little Rock. That is our next GenWealth Academy workshop. Visit getreadyforthefuture.com/academy to sign up and check out other events in your area. That is all the time we have for this week's Get Ready for the Future show. Great questions this week. Hope you gained something by joining us, and we hope you will join us again next week. If you want to get a question in for the show, call in or text 501-381-5228. We'll see you again next week.
The GenWealth financial team is available to you 24/7 at info@getreadyforthefuture.com or call our offices at 866-653-PLAN. That's 866-653-7526. You should personally consult a financial advisor before making any investment, and no strategy can assure success. Securities offered through LPL Financial. Member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice offered through Independent Advisor Alliance. Independent Advisor Alliance and GenWealth Financial Advisors are separate entities from LPL Financial.